find it. I don't want to keep you holding while I dash through the house.
Well, maybe you'll find it afterwards and call me back.
Yeah, I think it's 1991 was the publication date.
Who published it?
The University of Alabama Press. Or in 1992, my book, Kentucky, was a book of Yiddish poetry. It grew out of the whole project, and the whole interest came out of my dissertation. I translated a book of Yiddish poetry and did a critical analysis of it. It's called Kentucky by a Yiddish poet, Gertrude Schwartz, and that dealt with Jews in
You do what?
Schwartz.
Schwartz.
I gave you the Yiddish
Yeah,
pronunciation.
it would be SCH.
Yeah, WARTC.
And you called your dissertation Kentucky?
It was the name of the book of poetry that he wrote.
I see.
He came as one of the immigrants in the large wave of immigration to America, 1906, 1910, something like that, and the city was not conducive to him. He wanted to find something that was more in line with his view of America rather than the Lower East Side. And so he had a sister who lived in Louisville, Kentucky, or in Lexington, Kentucky. He went down there she said, come here, we'll make a living together. Also, it was very hard to make a living in New York City at that time. So he moved to Kentucky at the invitation of his sister, and he began writing about what he saw. I mean, the whole landscape was a very tiny Jewish community there, and he was very impressed with the whole history. It was right after the Civil War, and he met people he wouldn't ever see in the
Right.
North,
Right.
like freed slaves and Indians and white Christians and
Yeah.
former plantation owners. Anyway, he wrote this book of poetry, and taking a Jewish family through 3 generations. What he was interested in is the impact of America on Jewish ethnic identity. But he was very entranced with the land and the landscape, and and that is what brought me back to my own experience, because my parents also could not stand New York City, and so they picked themselves up and moved, south of the Hudson, not down south anyway. And so that's how I came to do this book, and I tried to do some research because I was writing my historical introduction to the book, and I wanted to know what else was written about Jews in rural environments. But there was almost nothing that I could find except Samuel Joseph's book, I guess. Being Jewish, when you see a void in the world, you have some responsibility. You have to fill the void, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how I began to, I thought I had this experience and no one has written about it, so maybe I should. That's how I came to do it.
Good. I like that. Okay. You mentioned in the press release, the introduction sort of talks about biblical times and the Jewish holidays revolving around agricultural events and stuff.
There are plenty of Jewish holidays.
Can you tell me a little bit about these communities and their observance? And now I know from the man I spoke to that synagogue in Woodbine was Orthodox.
Yeah, most of them said there was no reform movement here. Well, I guess there was.
There was a reform movement, and reform movement grew out of Germany.
Yeah, but when did it take hold in New York? The end of the 19th century or the beginning of the 20th century.
So what I wanted to know was, were the people who were doing this, were they connected in rituals as well? Or my model, I'm afraid, is that I spent 9 years on a kibbutz in Israel, and it's a non-religious kibbutz. So they threw it all over.
That's what the Jewish.
So I want to know what happened in New Jersey.
Well, there were a lot of immigrants. I mean, crossing the ocean broke their way of life. You know, they weren't living in Europe anymore. And many of them threw it all away. Through religion, everything, but the spirit still remained. When they moved out to...
Are you saying that most of them were from Orthodox families originally?
I don't know. There were only Orthodox Jews in the villages of Poland. I mean, the synagogues were Orthodox.
Okay, let me put it this way. Were the people who moved to these farming communities, were they people who came directly from farming communities, or were they people who moved from the city to the farm?
In Europe, most people lived in rural environments. In 3/4 or 90% of the Pale where they lived, they could not own land.
I know.
So if you couldn't own land, you can't really farm. But they lived in rural kinds of environments, in the villages, in the townlets, and so they lived in that environment. Maybe they had a cow or a goat or a couple of chickens, but they weren't really farmers because most couldn't own land, except in parts of Galicia where, a percentage of the Jews lived.
I know that Ken's family on both sides, his grandparents were feed handlers. They were cattle people.
Cattle dealers.
Yeah. Animal dealers.
Yeah. So they lived in a rural type of environment. I also went back to Poland to visit the village my father came from, because I wondered that same thing, what made him want to go on a farm. And when I got there and I saw the environment, I understood completely.
I got it. Okay. When did you leave
New York?
No, when did your family, I understood it was your family who had gone to New Jersey?
Yeah, my father, my mother,
So
and bringing along 4 children.
So you grew up on the farm?
I grew up on the farm. I was 6 when we left New York City.
And you became a farm kid?
Right. And we lived, we had Christian neighbors. And one of the first things that in our community, when they decided they needed to have a place to meet and to congregate and to daven on the high holy days, although they were all emancipated Jews, they still remembered that. And mainly they needed to be able to, that their children should know that they were Jewish.
So they formed a synagogue?
A community center. Which functioned also as a synagogue and as a meeting place for them, a social gathering place. They lived scattered over miles, but they needed to have a place, and they lived among Christians mainly.
Yeah.
So the community centers, or the little synagogues, also serve the purpose of giving them a place, a home, so to speak, to meet with others. And services were held in our synagogue in Farmingdale were initially held only on the high holidays. They were led by members of the members. They were led by the farmers. Actually, one man was trained in Europe as a chazan. He had a most magnificent voice, and so he conducted a lot of the services. And the first cooperative purchase, these people didn't know anything about American business or U.S. farming practices. They knew nothing. It was the Baron de Hirsch, the Jewish Agricultural Society office in New York, that sent a lot of people to Farmingdale and to the other villages. And they had an agent that went to visit people to teach them how to, what to do.
I knew a guy like that in Israel. That was his job. He studied Rehovot, and he went from moshav to moshav, helping the farmers understand what they were doing and put it together.
That's right. So they needed to know, but, Jews are very fast learners. Mm-hmm. In the synagogue, but they were also sort of like very involved in social issues as well as in farm issues. So very typically they would go to a synagogue meeting to find out something about how to take care of one aspect of chicken raising or another, and they disposed of that item how to deal with lice in the chicken coop. They disposed of that in a few minutes, and then they got on to how do you deal with the Spanish Civil War. And so they had long arguments about the Spanish Civil War. Social issues were very important in the social lives of the farmers. Mm-hmm. Arguing the world. It's typical Jewish experience, isn't it? They brought all that over with them.
And so in this book, in your book, do you study only the farmers, or do you study a town like Woodbine that must have had a shoemaker? I mean, it was an all-Jewish town.
It was an all-Jewish town. That town was created by the Baron de Hirsch Fund. It was laid out.
So not everybody was a farmer.
I guess there were a few business people.
I was the shoe repair person on my kibbutz for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was a real center of activity in terms of talking social issues and politics, the way nothing else was on the kibbutz. You'd come there and schmooze and have tea. That's what they told me in the old days. So I made sure that there was a tea kettle and lots of little seats for people to sit on, and people started coming back and talking about Zionism. I mean, they didn't talk about Zionism anymore.
They didn't talk about what to do with the farm crops or anything like that. They talked about the whole issue of Zionism.
Well, not in the shoe shop anyway. Maybe it was me trying to get them going, but they were places, a place to talk. It could be a shul, it could be the barber shop, it could be the shoe repair shop.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that kibbutz that you asked me about, the one near Hightstown, outside of Hightstown.
Yeah.
Hightstown is a few miles from Princeton. Einstein used to go there on Friday nights because he enjoyed. Einstein was at Princeton. Mm-hmm. He'd go there because he really enjoyed the discussions that they had there on Friday nights. He'd go with his violin, and after the discussion, he entertained them. It's really a charming story, I think.
To hear the discussions. And entertain. I don't do shorthand here.
That's all right.
Okay, let me go to another question here. Do you still have a connection to that farm?
An emotional connection?
No, more than that.
I would, no, I don't.
So your parents sold it?
My parents sold their farm, and, the farm economy completely collapsed after the Korean War, and it became easier, I guess, I don't know if it was easier. I have my own kind of theory that the whole collapse of the poultry industry in the East was sort of manipulated in Washington, but that's a theory I have not been able to yet, substantiate, prove. But they were, Jewish farmers being radical were very suspect people, so the FBI was here a lot. I don't know if you want to put that into your press release or not. Maybe.
I'm not doing a press release. I'm doing an interview with you.
Oh, okay.
So you can say whatever you want.
So anyway, because Jewish farmers in America is sort of a radical concept, this prevalent stereotype is, and this is in some of the literature that I study, is that Jews will not work like other people, but persist as parasites.
Yeah.
Living always, letting others be the producers, and they are merely the consumers.
Mm-hmm.
You must have heard this.
Yes, I did. When I chose to do architecture as my study, my mother-in-law said, Jews don't do that. It was the same thing. You didn't do architecture because it was just not one of those Jewish professions. You didn't do things that stayed. You had professions you could take with you. Anyway, this is not about.
So that the Jews didn't, but the Goyim said Jews don't farm, and it was very hard. That's what made the Baron de Hirsch start the Jewish Agricultural Society, to be able. Jews couldn't get low interest loans to farm because they were told that they had very slim chance of succeeding. They have no history in farming. And so the Baron de Hirsch started the Jewish Agricultural Society, provided them with low-cost loans, sent out the agents to teach them if they needed to know. It was all part of the social engineering, maybe. I don't know. I never thought of it in those terms.
Jane?
Yes?
Hi. Are you speaking to Miss Dubrovsky?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good.
She remembers you.
Well, I remember her.
Oh, that's so nice.
Oh, yeah, I remember you quite well.
Oh, well, very nice. I haven't been going to meetings lately.
Neither have I.
Oh.
The reason I'm interrupting you, which I don't normally do, Jane, would you find out if the book is in print and we can order it to have it to reading? I just got a call from the Amherst Jewish Center, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to hang up. I'm going to hang up.
University of Alabama Press.
Okay, Jane will get the info. Nice to talk to you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
It's in print.
Yes, and I'll give you the number of the university.
The ISBN would be good if you could find the or anything. What number were you going to give me?
I was going to give you the number of the University of Alabama Press.
That's a good thing. I could do that.
Okay, it's 1-800-825-9980.
Okay, University of Alabama. All right, let me get back to this. Your parents sold the farm when you were an adult?
Oh, yes. When I married, I vowed I was not going to become a farmer. I was not going to live on a farm. I was going to leave it. And
well, that was
I married
a
farmer.
You did marry a farmer?
I did. And we had a farm of our own. That's in my film. And I was there until 1970. I lived on our farm, on the farm we created. And then I moved to Princeton.
I married a farmer. And you live near Princeton then?
I live in Princeton now, in the town.
But what town did you end up in? Where was your farm?
In Farmingdale, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. So you ended up living most of your life on a farm?
Pretty much.
So when did you leave? When did you?
I left in 1970. The farm economy collapsed by the mid-50s. There were almost no farmers left in Farmingdale.
What did you farm, you and your husband?
Chickens. Farmingdale was, Jews did every branch of farming, but, people don't want to admit that. So when they remember, oh yeah, maybe in America they were chicken farmers. That's all they will say. But
well, I knew about the chicken farmers of New Jersey from way back. Yeah. I know a woman in the Springfield community who lived in Connecticut when she came back after the war, came to America, and she had a chicken farm with her husband. Yeah, on the kibbutz, it was the one thing I really did not want to ever do, and that was deal with the chickens. I thought that was really awful work.
Well, it was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Everyone had to work on the farm, and everything was done. It's very intensive hand labor involved. They don't do that anymore.
I don't know. On the kibbutz, you had to get up at 4. They were raising chickens. That's what they were doing, and then they were sending them off. And you had to take 5 chickens in each hand by the feet, and then put them in the cages or something. You were picking up little chicks. Okay. Let me ask you. So, do you think that stereotypically, I think of Jews as always dreaming for their children to do better than they. And I don't know what a Jewish farmer dreams for their children. Do they dream, like all the parents that I know, that their children will become professionals? Do they in fact sabotage themselves in terms of getting their children to stay on their own farms?
I don't think so. I think, owning land, you have a stake in America, something they could not do in Europe. So that already was an inheritance, a significant inheritance. They didn't think that farming was a demeaning kind of profession, and it certainly is.
Well, did they wish for their children to stay and farm the land?
My father certainly wished that. And I'm sure that other farmers wished that for their children, that they had, given them an inheritance that was worthwhile and valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
did any of his children take over the farm?
Well, the whole farm economy collapsed.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And many farmers lost their land.
Oh, yeah.
Lost their farms. That also was manipulated by the feed producers.
Tell me about your film. Did you do this film? How much after the book did you do the film?
I finished the book, but the book wasn't published until 1990, I think, 1991. And the University of Alabama Press first heard about my book on Jewish farmers. I had a really hard time interesting anyone because they said, Jewish farmers? Ha! You got to be kidding. About the 2 Jewish farmers that there are in America, they just discounted the whole thing. So I I finished Kentucky and then started working on Farmingdale. And Kentucky was the University of Alabama Press was interested in that Farmingdale book, and I said, I'm not giving it to you unless you publish Kentucky first. So they did.
Okay, so wait a second. The first book
was Kentucky that I published.
And what was that what did you call it?
Kentucky.
Oh, I thought Kentucky was the title of the Schwartz poetry book.
It was written in Yiddish. I translated the book into English and did a long critical analysis. That was my dissertation.
Okay, and translated in critical analysis. Okay, and it was called Kentucky.
And it was called Kentucky.
Okay.
So
you then went on to a second book.
Right, called The Land Was Theirs. It grew out of my work on Kentucky because it made me wonder about what was written about Jews outside of New York City, and I didn't find it.
Okay, wait a second. So I'm just trying to understand the order of things here. You found the University of Alabama was interested in the book Kentucky.
They were interested in the farm book.
Oh, on the farm book.
They were interested in it, and I said, I'm not going to give it to you unless you publish Kentucky first.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
And so they took Kentucky. I mean, the University of Kentucky Press said, oh, yeah, which is the logical press to have published it, right?
Yeah.
They said, interesting, that doesn't really have anything to do with us. It doesn't have anything to do with Kentucky. And I said to them, well, the poet didn't name it Texas. He didn't name it Missouri. He named it Kentucky.
He lived in Kentucky.
He lived in Kentucky. He wrote about Kentucky. Anyway.
So the University of Kentucky was not interested.
Hmm?
They were not interested.
The University of Kentucky Press was not interested.
Alabama was interested in the farm book, but you got them to publish the Kentucky book as first.
Yes. And then they took the farm book. So the two books came out 1 year after the other. It's very hard to get a book published. You must know.
Okay. I asked you about the film.
The film, then, because I knew that this is a subject that very few people knew about. I knew how the stereotype of Jews as non-farmers negatively affected Jews. That I decided that to educate the largest number of people, and it's a good story, that it should be a documentary film. Without having any experience at all in doing a documentary film, I plunged in and did this film.
And did you have any idea of where you were going to have it distributed? It was founded by Russian and Polish Jews, and then in the 30s there was an influx of German Jews.
Right.
And they were a different group altogether.
Altogether.
And they never quite blended.
Well,
they were really culturally very different.
Right. Kept to themselves, were always very polite, which is different.
Polite?
Polite.
Oh, polite.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they also tended to be more educated. They didn't come necessarily in their youth.
That's right.
Whereas the first group came as young, 20-year-olds.
Young idealists. Yeah.
Right. With no profession.
Right. But the German Jews, they were looking for a way out. They'd go anywhere.
Yeah, if they could, they came with their silverware.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, that's a very good piece that you just gave me there.
And then the last group were the Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
And they're from Eastern Europe now.
Uh-huh.
That's group number 4. As the farm economy was collapsing.
So, when you see a group like this, a Chabad group, creating itself, what does that make you feel and think?
What does it make me feel or think when I hear that a Chabad group is going to be settling on the land in America and will probably be successful in what they're doing? I don't know. It makes me pleased. It pleases me. Does it please you?
Me too.
I feel very pleased about that. They're going to have trouble. I think they probably will have trouble because they make themselves noticeable.
Yeah, but they're you mean trouble? Well, they live here already. They live in, apartments.
Yeah.
They're all just planning to move into a village together.
Yeah. They're going to settle on the farm in a rural environment. I hope they don't have any trouble. I hope.
You said a minute ago that they would succeed.
They would. I think they'll succeed. Don't you?
I hope so.
They'll figure something out. I think that's what you have to do. You have to.
Well, they have their own. What we had before, the agents. They have their own in-house agent.
Oh. Okay.
So hopefully that'll work for them.
Are they coming to this talk?
Well, I'm going to let them know.
Good. Wonderful.
So, what do your kids do?
One one is a real estate. One works with real estate. My oldest son. He lived right across from where the old Jewish Community Center was. He still lives in the same area where he grew up, where he was born and grew up. Has to live on the land. The second one moved to the Catskills, also lives in a kind of rural kind of environment. He became a builder. It was what he learned by doing. All the farmers learned by doing, and so my kids got that example.
Mm-hmm.
He's very successful in what he's doing. He designs and builds houses and wins architectural awards, and he's very proud of saying, and I'm not an architect. And my third son is in multimedia in Boston. He was the baby. He started Hebrew school in the basement of the Jewish Community Center, where, one of the religious people from Lakewood. Lakewood is a center of very religious people. And she would come and teach these kids. It started out as we all went to Yiddish shul. That was one of the first things. After they bought the Torah, they began to think that we need to teach our children something, and Yiddish was their language. So we had a Shalom Aleichem folk shul, and Yiddish teachers came every weekend, and they were very talented people. Our first teacher was an immigrant from Eastern Europe at that time, escaped. He was a psychiatrist by training, and he came out in the weekends and taught us Yiddish. It was such a wonderful experience.
So how did this come out? How did this come about, the Shalom Aleichem folk shul? Who started that? Why?
The farmers started that right after they bought their Torah.
They bought a Torah.
Their first cooperative purchase was a Torah. Although all of them, they were all worldly, but their first cooperative purchase was a Torah, and the thing was their excuse. They had to teach the children something about Judaism. They had to know. They themselves, threw away all the rituals, all the observances, but not completely. And it was all in them, in their hearts. So they bought their first cooperative purchase was a Torah, and they started we had a Shalom Aleichem folk shul in Farmingdale.
Wait a second, I'll get back to that page. In Farmingdale. Let me make sure I get the spelling right. Folkschule. Folkshule.
I guess so. That'll do.
Teaching Yiddish to the adults.
Teaching Yiddish to the children.
Oh, to the children.
And when Dr. Shegelov came, the teachers came from New York City. He slept overnight. We had our shul met Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. The teacher slept overnight at Farmer's house. And for us, for the children, the whole time I grew up and lived in Farmingdale, this may astound you, I never went into a Christian home. The two words by us were uns and they. Do you understand?
Us and them.
Us and them. And they was understandable.
The whole time you were a child?
Right. I never went into a Christian home. We knew that, the Ku Klux Klan was active in Farmingdale. Every time someone bought a piece of property, a foreigner, a Jew, they paraded in front of that house wearing their white sheets. And there was a cross burning.
This you saw?
I did not see it. But in the late 20s, the synagogue went up in 1929, I think. And the first thing that the Klan did was to burn a huge cross opposite it.
every home purchased, the Klan responded.
Not everyone. In the beginning. You know, they began to feel, they were at first happy to sell parcels of their land to these new people.
Yeah.
Then they saw that the whole character of their community was changing. And they felt very uncomfortable about that.
Yeah.
And so that's how I did not see the cross burning, and I didn't see the Klan, but people that I interviewed did. And I looked through about 15 years of the local paper. Nothing was ever reported of that in the local papers, but at least 6 people told me of witnessing it. So I had to believe them. If it was only one person, well, I think they're making up stories. But when 6 people tell you the same thing,
It's time to sit down.
yeah.
No reporting in local press. Listen, I'm going to write this up. If I find that there's something that's missing that I really want to know, I'll call you back. But otherwise, I think I'm set.
I'm so sorry that I didn't call you this
That's
morning.
okay. I had other things I could just do, and that was fine. I work and live in the same place.
Oh,
We live in a firehouse.
Yeah?
In an old firehouse. It was built in 1937, part of the WPA construction project. And we live upstairs above the shop, and downstairs we have a warehouse of books.
Oh.
And there must be, 25,000 books.
Wow.
And our computer.
Uh-huh.
And Ken is, busy inputting books into the computer. And upstairs is our life with all its, mess and activity and also books.
The Modern Language Association is meeting in New York this December. Is he going to be there, or he doesn't go? He
doesn't go there. Usually he goes to the AJS, American Jewish
Studies.
Are
they still meeting?
They meet every year, but they've started becoming more democratic, and they meet in different places all over the country. They used to always meet in Boston.
Right, that's when I went to the...
Right, so now they're meeting, next one is in Los Angeles.
Oh, well.
And they always meet in December.
So Ken goes to the meetings?
No, he hasn't been in a couple of years. When it's away from our home, and we can't schlep our boxes with us, we haven't gone. We're we have a simple operation. And we're not high flyers financially.
Yeah.
So it's harder for us to do those long trips.
Yes.
Plus, we still have a kid at home.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah.
It's always wonderful to have a child at home.
Well, sometimes.
How old is
this? This is a 16-year-old, and it's
the
the last one.
That's the terrible 16.
This is okay. We've seen it before.
How many children do you have?
Well, we have 4 between us. And so, I have, my eldest one is 30, and she lives near Tel Aviv.
Oh, she must be scared stiff all the time.
No.
Not.
People don't live like that, scared stiff. The people live in New York scared stiff of being mugged.
Was she born in Israel?
No. But we lived 9 years in Israel.
I see.
And she lives there now. And the 24-year-old lives in Northampton. She's a massage therapist and is struggling to figure out her life a little bit. And then the 23-year-old is Ken's, and he's in San Francisco. He's a computer person. And the 16-year-old is living at home here with us. She's also Ken's, but I've known her since she's 5.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So we're the next thing I have to do is write this up and then go make the sukkah. And I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the reverse. While the sun is up, I'm going to go make the sukkah.
Okay, it's been lovely talking
to
you.
I
look forward to meeting you, and I'll get directions, I'm sure.
And tell Paula I'd love to meet her, and she should come up also. If it's nice weather, you're coming at the best time of year.
Oh, good.
And you're going to see all the beautiful color here.
Oh, wonderful.
And you might find it interesting to visit Deerfield, historic Deerfield. Tell her that.
Okay.
It's a town. It's the old Deerfield, and it's been pulled together with buildings that have been moved there, so every other building is a museum.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for
Thank you.
being so patient and persisting, and I'm really sorry.
That's fine.
So,
You gave me time to do a little more research.
okay. All right.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.